Hey everyone, it's Wolfgang. I wanted to talk about how to work in a startup with reduced worry and anxiety. I'll read this. Startups are risky. There's sudden failure and job loss. Sometimes you have to skip paychecks while a new funding round is being arranged. If you plan ahead for the economic uncertainty that comes with being in a startup, you're better positioned to be more at peace during the time you work at the startup. So I've been involved in several startups. Some companies I started myself with friends. I've worked at startups. They are risky. You cannot really earn a great return in life without taking some risk. There's the risk of sudden shutdown and losing your job really quickly, but that happens with a regular job too, right? There's the risk of having to skip paychecks, not getting paid while the company is trying to raise the next funding round. So I've got friends who this has happened to. It's happened to me too, sudden shutdown. So the best thing you can do if you're going to get involved in startups is plan ahead and set yourself up ahead of time so that you can reduce the amount of anxiety and worry that you can have, compared to a regular job. Because regular jobs, generally, they're not going out seeking the next round of funding and then not paying the employees because they've run out of money. That generally does not happen with the regular job. Another thing with the startup is you're working a lot longer hours usually, which doesn't usually come up with a regular job. So you're setting some of your free time aside to work at a startup, and so it's risky. It needs to pay off. And at a minimum, you shouldn't have to worry and have anxiety while you're involved in the company. And there's things you can do that I learned over time to set yourself up to be at ease while you're involved in a risky startup. First thing, have savings before joining. 6 months of savings to pay all your bills for 6 months. You could say 3 months, but I would say 6 months or longer before, plan ahead before you decide, okay, I'm going to join a startup. Have that money set aside. A working spouse, which is something I had, is a great cushion if the startup fails, if it shuts down suddenly and you lose your job. Having a working spouse to cushion, as a cushion to give you the time to find that next job comes in handy. So being married is a bonus. Because you're setting yourself up to not have anxiety before getting involved in startups, you should avoid buying like a new car or making big purchases. The idea is to conserve your cash reserves to reduce the angst that comes when you're involved in a risky venture. Okay, so there's two types of people who get involved in startups that I've seen over the years. Okay, there's kind of like two mindsets. There are burn the boats sort of people. That phrase comes from Cortez, the Spanish explorer. In 1519, they landed in South America to conquer the Aztecs, and he burned all the ships to motivate his soldiers, his army. So that can work for people who skydive, base jump, wingsuit, and so on. So using fear as a tool to motivate people, it works for some people. That's one mentality, a burn the boats sort of mentality. You're motivated by fear to succeed. That doesn't work for everybody. And the subject of this video is how to not worry in a startup, because the vast majority of us do not base jump, do not wingsuit, and do not skydive. We're sort of closer to our survival instincts. The vast majority of the population is more in touch with survival instincts than burn the boat sort of mentality. But that can work. If you're that kind of person, that can work. But if you're not, having a plan B is great for people who don't like feeling cornered or trapped. If you're always at risk of having your income go to zero and you've got no savings and you're not married and you don't have roommates who are providing some income, that's a feeling of being trapped or cornered. Most people do not like that. Not everyone is motivated by the fear of running completely out of money. Burn the boats people, maybe, but most of us are not like that. Okay, so how can you create a plan B? For this sort of person, having a plan B before you get involved in startups, how do you go about that? This is something I did. First, list every part-time gig you can think of that you might be able to do. These are things from my history. I did consulting part-time. I did teaching part-time. I did a part-time regular job. I actually had a paper out while I was in college. And most of these did not earn a lot of income. But the whole point of this video is how to reduce your anxiety if you're involved in a startup. If you have a plan B activity that's earning at least some money, that can set you at ease, because in the back of your mind, you can say, I've got that second stream of income. If this all goes away, a sudden shutdown, I have a cushion. I can find another job and I still have a modest amount of income. Uber Eats, Lyft, a part-time sales job, which is great if you're involved in a startup. It's always great to know sales if you're involved in a startup company. So like I said, I did teaching, I did consulting, I operated a rental property, my first rental property, didn't make a lot of money. The income was not great, but it was something. And that's the point. The point is to set yourself up so you reduce the anxiety level. Most of us are not burn the boats mentality sort of people. Startups feel risky, and it's always great to have a part-time gig. Now, I want to say something about having a part-time gig. So in one particular startup, I did have a boss who objected to having a plan B, and I did it anyways. I thought to myself, well, he is my boss. He does set my my working hours. And I was pretty recently out of college. That startup went public, and I did quite well with that. But nevertheless, that boss, he made it very clear he did not appreciate the fact that I had a Plan B income stream. But I thought to myself, I'm going to set myself up. I do not want to sit here and worry about this company shutting down suddenly, losing my job, or skipping paychecks because the company's trying to raise money. So if you have a boss like that, just keep in mind you're your own person. You have to know if you're a Plan B sort of mentality, and you have to push forward and have something else to fall back on. That's what I did. It worked. And that company went public, and I was an early employee as a software engineer. I did quite well, but I always had a Plan B going in the background. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So you have to ignore people who might put up resistance to you sitting there saying, yeah, but I need another income stream just in case. There's absolutely no shame in that sort of desire. So the other thing about startups is you sort of have to be ready to sacrifice all your free time if you're going to have a Plan B. That's what I did. I was involved in startups. I had the income from the startup, the paychecks, but I also had a second income stream and absolutely no free time, no recreation, nothing. So you have to acknowledge going in, planning ahead, that you're going to set yourself up with a Plan B, second stream of income, and you're going to sacrifice, most of your free time. I mean, there will be situations where you'll be able to cut out some time after a project delivery is completed. So this is a review. De-risking a startup job. Take roommates for income if you can. We had roommates. We were married and we had roommates. So saying, well, I'm married, I can't have roommates. Yes, you can. We did that repeatedly. When you're working at a startup, there's a risk of having to skip paychecks and a sudden shutdown. You can take roommates when you're young and you're married for income, to build up the income. Sometimes the maximum number of roommates we have is 1, 2, 3, 4 roommates at one point. 6 months of savings, part-time income from a Plan B activity, spouse working, and also stay caught up with your network. And here's what I mean by that. We all have a circle of acquaintances and friends. That's the network. You need to, from time to time, communicate with them. You don't have to go visit them and stay with them for hours at a time, but you should stay caught up with them, because if something bad happens, if you end up having a shutdown of the company and you need to plug yourself back into a regular job, if you have abandoned your network, you've abandoned the opportunity to maybe find leads about job openings at companies. So in one startup in particular, I found a next gig by some heavy networking that worked out pretty well. So you don't want to abandon your network just because you have a Plan B and a startup thing going on at the same time. So a question comes up, am I going to feel overwhelmed and overworked if I'm getting involved in a startup and I try to pick up a second stream of income? So you have to know yourself about that. In my case, and a lot of people who go to college, you get used to multitasking. You have to be good at multitasking, and you just learn how to budget your time correctly and to eliminate inefficiencies in your time. So if you have any questions about this, I have a fair amount of experience in startups. I'd be really happy to answer any questions you have. And I want to wish everybody the best of luck, because I did quite well with this. It wasn't always easy. There were some shutdowns along the way. But it can work, and it's worthwhile to do it, especially if you're younger, because you have a lot of time to recover. If something does go south, if the startup closes, you have time to plug yourself back into a regular job and then try another startup down the road. If you have any questions, please post in the comments. I want to thank everyone for watching. Have a great day.